Actually, I have a suit for violating the child labor
Tight squeeze. Yeah. It's better when you come in full house.
I gotta sit here.
Mr. President, we welcome you to this meeting. I don't have to tell a crowd like this about your commitment to making the political system work. One of the highlights of my life in public service has been my opportunity to be associated with you when you served as governors of our neighboring states, and now to be reassociated with you in working on the one commission that brings to the table leaders from all of the levels of government. And I thank you for entrusting this commission with the responsibilities of making the federal system work better. We welcome you here today. We are appreciative of the demands on your time and for you to take the time to come and meet with us at this first meeting of this commission as it is now constituted. I think says more than anything else about your commitment to what we're about. My colleagues of the commission, ladies and gentlemen, it's my very great privilege to present the President of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. First, Governor Winter and to all the other members of the commission, let me thank you for your willingness to serve. I very much believe in the potential of this group, both because of the quality of the individuals on it and because of the way it's constituted, with representatives from the federal, the state, and the local government, and with both Democrats and Republicans here. I also want to say a special word of thanks to my friend Bill Winter for being willing to serve as chair. He is one of my closest personal as well as political friends. When he was willing to do this, because I knew that he had spent years thinking about a lot of these issues, I felt that we had a chance to make this group succeed. When we began to talk, 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago now, about whether I would run for president. He and I agreed that one of the things that we needed to do was to somehow restore the integrity, the strength, the vitality of the relationships between the various levels of government. One of the biggest problems we've got in this country today is that everybody knows that there are a lot of things that the government has to be involved in at some level, but there is a great skepticism about the ability of government to do its job, particularly here in Washington. A skepticism not without foundation, I might add. There was a wonderful article in the Wall Street Journal the other day talking about the attitudes of people in a town in Illinois about the health care issue. And one of the people who was quoted in the article had a one-sentence quote that I thought summarized in a way the dilemma that we all face, at least those of us who go to work here in Washington every day. The man said, "I believe in government, but I'm not sure I trust it." In other words, I believe in the idea. I know that there are some things the government has to do that can't be done without the government, but I'm not sure that it'll get done right, either because people will not do the right thing or because it won't be confidently done. Because I served a dozen years as a governor and worked on these federalism issues from another perspective, and because I worked in a, I think, considerably less partisan atmosphere, it's just the nature of state and local government to be more problem-focused and somewhat less ideologically oriented. I think I've got a pretty good sense about what the potential is of this group to try to help us in our efforts to redefine what we should be doing here in Washington and how we can be working with you better. The first thing I want to tell you is that I'm very serious about these issues and that I want to pursue them vigorously, thoroughly, consistently, and with the appropriate level of visibility. I'm glad to see my good friend Secretary Riley here, who also has shared the experience with Bill Winter and I. We were governors together for a long time, and who has a good feel for these things too. Carolyn Lukensmeyer's here to report to you on the federalism suggestions that came out of the National Performance Review, the Vice President's Reinventing Government report. He wanted to be here personally, but I asked him to go to Mexico today to deliver an important speech in the aftermath of the passage of the North American Free Trade Agreement legislation last week, and that's why he's there today and not here. But there are some important recommendations in the National Performance Review that I hope A, will be endorsed by this group, B, may be amplified on it, and C, that you may have some ideas about how we can actually implement them. We get a lot of wonderful ideas up here, but there's a lot of slips between the cup and the lip, so we need your help on that. Secondly, there are a whole series of empowerment initiatives that we have tried to take to enable state and local governments to do their jobs better by creating a different environment. The empowerment zone legislation is one. If these empowerment zones work to actually get private sector investment and public-private partnerships at the local level going in otherwise economically distressed areas of our country, then I think you will see them sweep the country. I think the Congress will be more than willing to vote more of the empowerment zones if we can prove it works. Well, that requires a level of partnership and follow-through that the federal government alone can certainly not provide. The Community Enterprise Board we've set up, designed to see what we can do to sort of push down more decision-making at the governmental level and to require more partnerships to build from the grassroots up is an important thing. I issued an executive order on unfunded mandates, which a lot of you were involved in helping me put together. Our administration has been quite vigorous in granting waivers to states for welfare reform experiments and for some health care reform experiments. And, I want to continue to do that, and I want you to explore with me what we can do to help you do your jobs better. Perhaps the most important recommendation of the Reinventing Government Commission was that we consolidate a lot of these grants and let you fashion your own use for the federal money that's been set aside in too many little discrete pieces for the benefit of people at the local level. So there are a whole lot of issues we could deal with. The main point I want to leave you with today is that I haven't forgotten what it was like to be on the other end of this relationship. First. Secondly, my appointment of Bill Winter and the quality of this commission demands that we take your work seriously. Thirdly, we actually need for you to think about what specific steps ought to be pursued in defining what the federal role ought to be. Let me just say one thing in closing, out of respect to the members of Congress who are here. There's been a lot of discussion in this town which will give way to reality as we move into the first budget year and as we move into next year's budget about how much we did or didn't cut spending. I asked yesterday Leon Panetta to tell me how many federal accounts there are, separate lines in the appropriations bill where there's actually less money this year to be spent than there was last year. And the answer is 356 specific federal accounts will have less money in this fiscal year than they did in the last year. Notwithstanding that, in the coming budget year, we are going to have to, under the budget plan we now have, we're going to have significant other budget cuts in various areas. Now, what I'm interested in doing is figuring out, and what the members of Congress will have to help do, is to figure out within a government department and then across departmental lines, what is it that the federal government should be doing? And if not doing, what should the federal government be funding for you to do? And what things are we doing that may be nice but are relatively inessential at a time when we clearly have the biggest dilemma for the Congress is this. Almost every person in the Congress, without regard to whether they're a liberal or a conservative or a Democrat or a Republican, believes that we have to continue to reduce the deficit. We know that the serious efforts we've made have produced low interest rates, higher investment, housing starts the biggest in 14 years, the beginning of this lumbering big economy coming back. On the other hand, virtually every member of the Congress, including the most conservative Republicans, believe we are not investing enough in certain areas that prevent bad things from happening, that develop the capacity of people, and most importantly of all, help us to make this transition from a defense to a domestic commercial economy. The great gaps in structural unemployment from California to New York and Connecticut, occasioned by the big cutbacks in defense spending, have made most everybody in the Congress quite sensitive to what kinds of investments we ought to have at the national level to generate jobs and high-wage jobs. So in order to achieve both those objectives, we have to be much more disciplined about what our job is and what your job is, about which of our programs really make a difference and which are nice but don't make that much of a difference, about how we can shift federal spending from more to more investment and relatively less consumption, to make it more forward-thinking. And there is a real willingness, I think, in the Congress to listen to and learn from the shared experiences of people in state and local government as we are forced to make these decisions. And believe me, whatever targets we do or don't adopt next time, if we just stay with the budget we've got, there is going to be an extremely rigorous and difficult budgetary process beginning here early next year. Anyone who's really studied the numbers knows that when you get beyond the rhetoric to the reality, there are a whole lot more reductions that are going to have to be made. So, on the other hand, everybody wants to increase funding in some areas. To whatever extent we are in sync with that, and we are building the kind of partnership we ought to be, this country is going to be much better off. And to whatever extent you feel that the government in Washington is doing the right things given its difficulties, and you can communicate that, we will collectively begin to rebuild the confidence of the American people that we're doing the best we can with the tax money they give us and in operating the government in a more efficient and effective way. I personally believe the consolidation of a lot of these discrete programs is very important, but if we do it, we have to find a way, and I hope that there'll be candid conversations about this. I hope the members of Congress will be candid with the state and local governmental representatives about this. There are reasons why these programs get created in the way they do, where you have 150 separate training programs. We shouldn't, but we do. Why we have all these other programs in little pieces, when it would be better if they were in one big piece and you had a laundry list of permissible things that could be done with this money, and then you would design what's best for your city, your county, or your state. And I hope we can get into exploring that, because I'm convinced with the amount of money fairly fixed, and with the demands on the money, and with the differences, the drastic differences in economics from place to place, you need a lot more flexibility than you've got. But we need to be candid here about why the laws are the way they are, what the problems have been in the past, and what kind of new arrangements we can make if we're going to have any hope of implementing the Reinventing Government recommendations on consolidating the grants. So that, in short, Mr. Chairman, are some of the things that I wanted to say. I believe in the potential of this group. I want to work with you. I want to help to make sure that you have both consistent support and the appropriate level of visibility, so that we send the message out to the country that we are trying to work through these things and give the American people a government that they can not only believe in, but also trust. Thank you very much. I just say about 10 minutes. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for that very reassuring and inspiring statement. And let me say on behalf of this commission that the talent represented around this table is available to you on a totally bipartisan basis to carry out the high purposes that you have just expressed. And frankly, if my colleagues on this commission can't be effective in doing that, I don't know who can, because there is so much talent here. As I said, representing every level of government, a unique commission. We accept your challenge, and we shall do our very best to live up to your expectations, and we shall be calling on you to continue to lend your support to our efforts, and we invite your suggestions, your ideas, and hopefully out of this process, we can strengthen the government of this country at all levels. Thank you again for being here, and I have invited the President to stay as long as he can. I know that he has other commitments very shortly. But, Mr. President, with your permission, we will proceed with the agenda. We have had the introduction of the members of the commission, with the exception of one of the most important members who is standing behind us, and that's Marcia Hale, who is Director of Intergovernmental Affairs and is the assistant to the President. Marcia, we couldn't have put this meeting together without you, and I want to thank you for your good efforts. I also note that another member of the commission, Senator Byron Dorgan of North Dakota, has arrived. Senator, would you let us recognize you? Thank you for being here. There are other visitors here that I especially want to recognize. Some of you have been introduced. I believe that Karen Morgan of Maryland, of the Maryland Legislature's Joint Committee on Federal Relations is here. Richard Platt, who is Executive Director of Ohio's State and Local Government Commission. Enid Beaumont, I think everybody knows Enid, who is the Director of the Academy for State and Local Government. Enid, thank you so much for all the support that you've given me and given this commission. Scott Fosler, another old friend, President of the National Academy of Public Administration. Thank you, Scott, for being here. And a special guest, Mr. Jonas Isawa Eligwu, who is the Executive Director of Nigeria's National Council on Intergovernmental Relations. Mr. Eligwu, welcome. We're honored by your presence.
We were worried about him.
And we're delighted to have I think I've already said, we're delighted to have so many of you who have expressed your interest in the commission by being present today. Let me move now. Yes, Mayor?
We get the agenda. At our last meeting, we tried to set our priorities for the coming year. Obviously, with new members, we're going to re-examine that. But one of the priorities that we focused on was the problem of unfunded mandates. And while the president is here, I wanted to take the occasion to say on behalf of all of us that his executive orders in September and October of this past year on unfunded mandates and the impact those executive orders will have on federal regulatory agencies is the best news that we in local government have heard from Washington in many decades. And Mr. President, obviously those, and you know the nature of the orders, they have to be worked out over the coming months. And I think ACIR and certainly all of us in local government and state government want to work with the federal regulatory agencies to make sure that those terrific orders, which are terrific on paper, do in fact become terrific in practice.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator
I
Burr.
wonder, well, the President's here, I might also make a Republican nonpartisan, which is an oxymoron perhaps, observation. Mr. President, before you came in, I observed that I've been on this commission since before Jim Watt became chairman and since about the time you became governor of Arkansas. And I've seen a lot in that period of time, and number one, it does my heart good to see so many people here, and I think in part it allegedly your presence, but more importantly, it's the reality that everybody in this room and people over here have been here for quite a while. I think everyone in this room understands that you could not have been governor for that long a period of time during this last 12 years. Accept the challenge to become President of these United States without feeling the need to restore the vitality of relationships, the problem of trust in government. Before you came in, I said, when I made my announcement not to run for a fourth term, some guy came up to me afterwards and said, now that you're not running for re-election, at least you can be honest. And I said, in response, I said, I think all of us try to be honest, but we're not believable. And I think you have sensed this in your own growth in the process. The challenge that I heard you lay on those of us who are the congressional members, besides coming to more meetings and being more participatory and so forth, is the challenge of deciding what should we be doing. This morning, my first sort of official act was to talk to Adam Clymer at the New York Times about the differences between Pat Moynihan and Teddy Kennedy, because I serve on both the Finance Committee and the Labor and Human Resources. And because of the little jurisdictional dispute that surfaced here a little while ago, there's some curiosity about how the two are going to get along and so forth. And one of the observations I'll share with you, and with all of our colleagues here, which relates to what should we be doing. The fact that on the Labor Committee and on the Finance Committee, I suppose we represent the best that is in each of us as a representative of our constituents. But probably we also represent something that's gone wrong in the whole federal system. The Labor Committee generates now at least 500 categorical responses to 1,000 different problems that are experienced at the community level. In the Finance Committee, we do all of the income security. We do taxes and trade and all the social insurance programs and so forth. So we have a clear national purpose there. Then when you go to the tax side, we're doing about 5,000 categorical approaches to problem solving through tax expense. And so, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, when we talk about pushing down decisions and we talk about the executive order on mandates and we talk about waivers and so forth, I think we have to be careful not to assume that all of these problems are our responsibility, the national government. They are not. They are not. They are our responsibilities as elected officials. But over a long period of time that precedes both your service, Mr. President, yours, Mr. Chairman, and my own, we have assumed that for a variety of reasons, we here are the responsible party. And so we have generated a lot of this activity, which holds people like the mayor and the county commissioner accountable through a whole variety of, whether it's mandates or the paperwork we complain about or whatever. And so I would make this observation: the Congress is not capable on its own of deciding what we as a national government should be doing. You have the gift, not only personally, but you have the gift of the office that you hold, to inspire us to see clearly what should be the responsibility of the national government, what is more appropriately our personal responsibilities as citizens and so forth, and then how all of those relationships can be made more vital. And later on, during the course of this day, I'm going to have some thoughts on this wonderful opportunity you've given us in healthcare reform to try to deal with this in a very specific way. But as a nonpartisan who has difficulty being believable and reflects a lot of the rest of us who always try to be honest about everything that we do, I really do think that's the challenge that you've laid on us. And knowing you, I think it's the challenge that you will keep before this commission all the time.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a remark? On behalf of the counties, I want to tell you that we appreciate you know, when you first took over as president, I must admit I couldn't believe you were just too good to be true. I mean, how could a man who projected such a magnificent vision for America be real? And you are. And I'm really impressed. We're all impressed with the commitment that you show, because we share that vision that the future of our country is going to depend on a mutual respect of all levels of government working together to solve our problems. And we stand ready to work with you. I've been impressed not only with the vision that you projected personally, but in your appointments in your cabinet. Carol Browner has been fantastic. Shelley worked with the counties on a special meeting, and we see some new partnerships that we've never seen before. And the same thing with your Department of Transportation and the other appointees. So I just want to thank you, really sincerely, from the bottom of my heart.
Let me thank my colleagues on the commission for making these observations. I know that every single member of the commission would like to say something to the president. But I also know that he has another commitment, and we do not want to detain him here. Let me thank you again, Mr. President, for taking the time to meet with this commission. We stand at your service, and we will try to respond to the instructions and the inspiration that you've given us today.